What happens when you accidentally crash the most sacred werewolf ceremony of the year and end up bonded to someone who definitely wasn't supposed to bite you? Well, let me tell you about the night that turned my perfectly ordinary life into a supernatural soap opera that would make even the most dramatic reality TV show look tame. Picture this. You're 23, working your third dead-end job this year, and your biggest worry is whether you can afford both rent and groceries this month. That was me exactly 6 months ago. My name is Sarah, and I thought the weirdest thing about my life was my obsession with true crime podcasts and my ability to burn water while cooking. Boy, was I wrong. It all started when I moved to Pine Ridge, this tiny mountain town that looked like something straight out of a Hallmark movie. You know the type. Quaint little shops, everyone knows everyone. And the biggest scandal is usually someone's prize-winning roses getting sabotaged at the county fair. I'd landed a job at the local diner, and honestly, after 3 months of city chaos, the sleepy small-town vibe was exactly what I needed. Or so I thought. The first sign that Pine Ridge wasn't your average small town should have been the way conversations would suddenly stop when I walked into a room. Not in a mean way. More like everyone was sharing some inside joke that I wasn't part of yet. The second sign was how everyone seemed to have these incredibly specific schedules around certain times of the month. And the third sign, which I completely missed like the oblivious human I was the fact that literally everyone in town looked like they could be fitness models. I'm talking about the kind of muscle definition that makes you wonder if there's something special in the water supply. Even Mrs. Henderson, who had to be pushing 70, could probably bench press my car. But you know what they say about hindsight being 20/20? The real story begins on what the locals called the Harvest Moon Festival. Now, I'd been living in Pine Ridge for about 3 months by this point, and I was finally starting to feel like maybe I belonged somewhere for the first time in my adult life. The festival sounded like exactly the kind of wholesome small-town event I needed to fully integrate into the community. Apple pies, craft booths, maybe some folk dancing. What could go wrong? Everything. Literally everything could go wrong, and it did. The festival was being held in the woods just outside town, which should have been my first red flag. Who holds a community festival in the middle of nowhere? But I was so excited to finally be included in something that I didn't question the logistics. I spent way too much money on a new dress, this flowy bohemian thing that I thought would make me look like I belonged with all these effortlessly gorgeous small-town people. The directions I'd been given were surprisingly vague. Follow the path behind the old mill until you hear the drums, then head toward the clearing. Drums at a harvest festival seemed a little intense, but hey, maybe Pine Ridge was more culturally diverse than I'd given it credit for. I grabbed a bottle of wine as a hostess gift and set off into the woods as the sun was setting. Here's where things get interesting. The path split about halfway through the woods, and I could hear drumming coming from both directions. Logic told me to go right, since that's usually the correct choice in these situations, but something about the left path felt more inviting. The drumming from that direction had this hypnotic, almost primal quality that seemed to call to something deep in my chest. So, naturally, being the protagonist of my own disaster story, I went left. The clearing I stumbled into was nothing like the cozy harvest festival I'd been expecting. Instead of craft booths and apple cider stands, I found myself looking at what could only be described as the most intense bonfire I'd ever seen, surrounded by at least 50 people in various states of undress, all moving to the rhythm of drums that seemed to make my heartbeat synchronize with the beat. And here's the thing that should have set me running immediately. Every single person there was absolutely gorgeous in that same unnaturally perfect way that characterized everyone in Pine Ridge. But instead of being intimidated, I felt this weird sense of rightness, like I was finally where I was supposed to be. The smart thing would have been to back away slowly and find the actual harvest festival. But the wine I brought seemed like such a waste, and everyone looked so welcoming, and honestly, the whole scene was mesmerizing in a way that made rational thought pretty much impossible. So I did what any socially awkward 20-something would do in that situation. I walked right up to the edge of the group and stood there awkwardly holding my bottle of wine, hoping someone would notice me and explain what kind of festival this actually was. That's when I saw him. Marcus Blackwood was the kind of man who makes you forget how to form coherent sentences. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it, and these intense amber eyes that seemed to see right through you. He was clearly the center of attention, standing near the fire with this commanding presence that made everyone else seem to orbit around him. And he was looking right at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, but his voice wasn't angry. It was almost amused, with this underlying warmth that made my stomach do weird fluttery things. "Oh, I'm sorry," I stammered, holding up the wine bottle like it would somehow explain my presence. "I was looking for the Harvest Moon Festival, and I must have taken a wrong turn somewhere. I can leave if this is a private party." The way everyone went completely silent should have been terrifying, but Marcus smiled, and suddenly the world felt like it had shifted into focus. "The Harvest Moon Festival," he repeated, and there was definitely amusement in his voice now. "Well, you're not technically wrong." Before I could ask what he meant by that, this younger guy, maybe early 20s, with the same ridiculously perfect features as everyone else, but with nervous energy that made him seem more approachable, bounded over like an overeager golden retriever. "Marcus, who's the human?" he asked, and okay, that was a weird way to phrase it, but I was too distracted by the fact that Marcus had said I wasn't technically wrong about this being a harvest festival. "This is Sarah," Marcus said, somehow knowing my name without me having told him. "She seems to have found us by accident." "Hi," I said, giving the younger guy a little wave. "I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name." "Tyler," he said, practically vibrating with excitement. "I'm Marcus's beta, and oh my god, you smell amazing. Like, seriously, has anyone ever told you that you have the most incredible scent? It's like vanilla, and something I can't quite place, and it's making me kind of dizzy." The way everyone started shifting uncomfortably should have been my cue to leave, but Tyler's enthusiasm was kind of endearing, and honestly, after months of feeling like an outsider, having someone be excited about my presence was a nice change. "Thanks," I said, "because how do you respond to someone complimenting your scent?" "That's probably just my shampoo." Marcus was watching this exchange with an expression that was getting more tense by the second. "Tyler," he said, and there was a warning in his voice that I didn't understand. "Right? Sorry?" Tyler said, but he was still staring at me with this fascinated expression. "It's just, Marcus, she doesn't know, does she? About what tonight is?" "What's tonight?" I asked, looking between them. The drumming had stopped, and everyone was watching our little group with intense interest. The silence was starting to feel heavy in a way that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, and I could see him having some kind of internal debate. "Sarah," he said finally, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Tonight is not exactly a harvest festival in the way you're thinking. It's a ceremony that's very important to our community, and outsiders aren't typically allowed to witness it." "Oh," I said, feeling my cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, I'll leave right now. I don't want to intrude on anything religious or cultural. I just got turned around in the woods." "Actually," Marcus said, and there was something strange in his voice, "I don't think leaving is an option anymore." Before I could ask what that meant, Tyler suddenly went very still beside me. Like, unnaturally still, in a way that made every instinct I had scream danger. When I looked at him, his eyes had gone completely black, and he was staring at me with an intensity that was absolutely terrifying. "Tyler," Marcus said sharply, "you need to step back, now." But Tyler wasn't listening. He was moving closer to me with this predatory grace that made me want to run, except my feet seemed to be rooted to the ground. "She smells like mate," he said, but his voice was different now, rougher, with this growling quality that definitely wasn't human. "She's not your mate," Marcus said, and there was real anger in his voice now. "You need to control yourself." That's when things went from weird to absolutely insane. The full moon, which had been hidden behind clouds all evening, suddenly broke free and bathed the entire clearing in this ethereal silver light. And I watched in complete shock as Tyler's face started to change. His jaw elongated, his teeth grew into fangs, and fur began sprouting along his cheekbones. I should have screamed. I should have run. I should have done literally anything other than stand there gaping like a fish out of water. But sometimes when your brain encounters something so far outside its understanding of reality, it just kind of short-circuits and leaves you standing there trying to process impossible information. Werewolves, I whispered, because apparently my brain's response to existential shock is to state the obvious. Sarah, Marcus said urgently, moving toward me. I need you to stay very calm. Tyler is going through his first transformation, and he's not fully in control. First transformation, I repeated numbly. This is a werewolf ceremony. Of course it is, because my life wasn't weird enough already. Tyler, who was now more wolf than human, was circling me with clear intent. The rational part of my brain was screaming at me to run, but there was something else, something deeper, that was telling me I was exactly where I needed to be. He's going to bite me, isn't he? I asked Marcus, with the kind of calm that only comes from complete shock. Not if I can help it, Marcus growled. And wait, when had his voice gotten so rough? When I looked at him, I could see that he was fighting his own transformation, his eyes flickering between amber and black. That's when Tyler lunged. Everything happened so fast that my human brain couldn't really process it. 1 second Tyler was in front of me, the next second Marcus was tackling him midair, and then somehow I was on the ground with Tyler's teeth buried in my shoulder, and Marcus roaring like a very angry werewolf. The pain was immediate and intense, but there was something else too. The moment Tyler's teeth broke my skin, it felt like lightning was racing through my veins. Not painful lightning, but the kind that makes every nerve ending in your body suddenly wake up and pay attention. Marcus hauled Tyler off me with more strength than should have been humanly possible, which made sense since he apparently wasn't human. Tyler immediately shifted back to his human form, looking confused and horrified. "Oh no," he said, staring at the bite mark on my shoulder. "Oh no, oh no, oh no. Marcus, what did I do? What did I just do?" I was sitting on the ground, pressing my hand to my shoulder, trying to understand why I felt more energized than hurt. The bite was definitely there, and it was definitely bleeding, but instead of feeling weak or scared, I felt like I could run a marathon. "You bit your alpha's mate," said a voice from the crowd, and everyone turned to stare at an older woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. During the wrong ceremony, no less. "What does that mean?" I asked, because apparently I was the only one who didn't understand the significance of what had just happened. Marcus knelt down beside me, his face a mixture of concern and something that looked almost like wonder. "It means," he said carefully, "that you're now bonded to Tyler through a bite that was meant for me." "Bonded," I repeated. "Like supernaturally bonded? The kind of bond that's supposed to last forever," Tyler said miserably. "The kind that's meant to happen between alphas and their chosen mates, not between betas and random humans who wander into transformation ceremonies." I looked around at all the faces staring at us with expressions ranging from fascination to horror to barely concealed amusement. "So let me get this straight," I said. "I accidentally crashed a werewolf transformation ceremony, got bitten by the wrong werewolf, and now I'm supernaturally bonded to someone who isn't even the person I was apparently supposed to be bonded to?" "That's a pretty accurate summary," Marcus said grimly. "And the person I was supposed to be bonded to is you," I continued, looking at Marcus. "The alpha." "Also accurate." Tyler was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair. "This is a disaster," he kept muttering. "This is an absolute disaster. Marcus is going to kill me. The pack is going to exile me. My parents are going to disown me." "Nobody's killing or exiling anyone," Marcus said firmly, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "We'll figure this out." "How exactly do we figure this out?" I asked. "Is there like a supernatural customer service line I can call? A supernatural lawyer who specializes in accidental bonding cases?" The older woman who had spoken earlier stepped forward. "There are ways to break an accidental bond," she said carefully. but they're complicated and potentially dangerous. More dangerous than being supernaturally bonded to someone I just met? I asked. That depends, she said. How do you feel right now? Physically, I mean. I took a mental inventory. My shoulder had stopped bleeding and the pain was fading to a dull ache. But more than that, I felt incredible. Like someone had plugged me directly into an electrical socket, but in a good way. Every color seemed brighter, every sound clearer, every scent more distinct. I feel amazing, I admitted. Which is probably not normal, considering I just got bitten by a werewolf. That's the bond, Marcus explained. It's enhancing your natural abilities and connecting you to Tyler's energy. And what's Tyler feeling? I asked, looking at the young werewolf who was still pacing frantically. Tyler stopped moving and looked at me with wide eyes. Like I could bench press a truck, he said. But also like I'm going to throw up from anxiety. It's very confusing. Despite everything that had happened, I found myself laughing. The whole situation was so absurd that hysteria seemed like the only reasonable response. This is insane, I said. This morning my biggest problem was figuring out how to ask my boss for a raise, and now I'm apparently in a supernatural bond with a werewolf who looks like he's barely old enough to drink. I'm 21, Tyler said indignantly. And I've been drinking since I was 18, thank you very much. That's not helping your case, I told him, but I was still smiling. There was something about Tyler's nervous energy that was oddly comforting. Like having an anxious golden retriever as a supernatural life partner. Marcus was watching our interaction with an unreadable expression. The bond is already affecting both of you, he observed. You're more comfortable with each other than you should be after knowing each other for less than an hour. Is that bad? I asked. It's not bad, he said carefully. It's just intense. Supernatural bonds are designed to create deep emotional connections very quickly. It's how our kind ensures loyalty and stability within pack structures. But I'm not a werewolf, I pointed out. I'm just some human who took a wrong turn in the woods. About that, the older woman said, you might want to prepare yourself for some changes over the next few weeks. Being bonded to a werewolf can trigger latent abilities in humans, especially if there's any supernatural ancestry in your bloodline. Supernatural ancestry? I repeated. My family tree is about as ordinary as it gets. My dad's an accountant and my mom teaches 3rd grade. My most exciting relative is my aunt who once appeared on a game show in the 80s. You might be surprised, she said cryptically. These things have a way of revealing themselves when the time is right. Tyler had stopped pacing and was now sitting on a nearby log, looking dejected. I'm so sorry, he said to me. I've ruined your life, haven't I? I considered his question seriously. My life had definitely taken an unexpected turn, but ruined felt like too strong a word. Ask me again in a week, I told him. Right now, I'm still processing the fact that werewolves are real, and apparently I'm bonded to one. The immediate question, Marcus said, taking charge in that alpha way that I was beginning to understand came naturally to him, is what happens next. Sarah, you can't go back to your normal life pretending this didn't happen. The bond will make that impossible. What do you mean? I asked. You'll be able to feel Tyler's emotions, especially strong ones, he explained. And he'll be able to feel yours. You'll also find yourself craving his presence, especially during stressful times. It's not romantic love, necessarily, but it's a deep emotional connection that can't be ignored. I looked at Tyler, trying to imagine being supernaturally connected to this nervous, sweet werewolf who looked like he was about to cry. That doesn't sound terrible, I said honestly. I mean, it's not what I planned for my Monday evening, but Tyler seems nice enough. Tyler's face brightened like I'd just told him he'd won the lottery. Really? You don't hate me for ruining your life? I don't hate you, I assured him. I'm confused and overwhelmed and probably in shock, but I don't hate you. Marcus was still watching us with that unreadable expression. There's something else we need to discuss, he said. The reason Tyler was drawn to bite you in the first place. Which is? I prompted. You smell like mate to him, Marcus said carefully. But you also smell like mate to me. The clearing went silent again, and I could feel everyone's attention focused on our little group. What does that mean exactly? I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. It means the older woman said, that you were meant to be mated to Marcus, but the bond went to Tyler instead. It's an extremely rare occurrence, and it creates a very complicated situation. I looked between Marcus and Tyler, both of whom were watching me with expressions I couldn't quite read. So let me understand this, I said slowly. I'm bonded to Tyler, but I was supposed to be bonded to Marcus. Tyler and Marcus are both werewolves in the same pack, and apparently none of this was supposed to happen. That's correct, Marcus said, and there's no easy way to fix it. Also correct. I sat there for a moment, trying to process the full scope of my new reality. Then I started laughing again, because what else was there to do? You know what? I said. I've been looking for excitement in my life. I guess I found it. Tyler looked at me like I'd lost my mind. You're taking this really well, he said uncertainly. Tyler, 6 hours ago, I was a waitress at a small-town diner, whose biggest concern was whether I could afford to get my car's oil changed this month. Now I'm supernaturally bonded to a werewolf and apparently have 2 supernatural soulmates. I think I've moved past normal emotional responses into some kind of shocked acceptance phase. 2 soulmates? Tyler repeated, glancing nervously at Marcus. Well, according to your pack elder here, I smell like mate to both of you, I said. Which suggests that the universe has a very twisted sense of humor. Marcus stepped closer to me, and I felt this weird tugging sensation in my chest, like invisible strings were pulling me toward him. The feeling was completely different from the warm, comfortable connection I felt with Tyler. This was more intense, more electric, with an undercurrent of something that made my pulse quicken. The situation is complicated, Marcus said, his voice rougher than before, but not impossible to navigate. What are you suggesting? I asked. I'm suggesting, he said carefully, that we take this one day at a time and see how the bonds develop. It's possible that having connections to both Tyler and me could actually strengthen all of us, rather than creating conflict. Tyler perked up like a dog hearing the word walk. You mean like a triad bond? I've heard of those, but I thought they were just legends. Most supernatural bonds that seem impossible are just rare, not mythical, the older woman said. But a triad bond involving an accidental bite and a human with unknown ancestry? That's the kind of situation that gets written about in pack histories. Great, I said. So I'm not just bonded to werewolves, I'm bonded to them in a way that's going to be studied for generations. That's not terrifying at all. Marcus knelt down beside me again, and this time when our eyes met, I felt that electric pull so strongly that I had to resist the urge to lean into him. Sarah, he said gently, I know this is overwhelming. If you want to explore options for breaking the bonds, we can do that. But I want you to know that having you here, even under these circumstances, feels right in a way I can't explain. Tyler nodded enthusiastically. It does feel right, he agreed. Like you were supposed to find us tonight. I looked around the clearing, taking in all the werewolves who were still watching our drama unfold with rapt attention. Then I looked at Marcus, with his intense amber eyes and commanding presence, and Tyler, with his nervous energy and golden retriever enthusiasm. The smart thing would be to ask about breaking the bonds and going back to my normal life. But here's the thing about normal lives. They're usually normal for a reason. And that reason is often that they're boring as hell. You know what? I said, standing up and brushing off my dress. I'm in. Let's see where this supernatural soap opera takes us. The cheer that went up from the assembled werewolves was so loud that I was surprised it didn't wake up the entire town. Tyler jumped up and spun me around, which should have been annoying but was actually kind of sweet. And Marcus smiled at me with such warmth that I felt my heart skip a beat. Welcome to the pack, Sarah, he said. I have a feeling our lives just got a lot more interesting. As the ceremony resumed around us, and I found myself officially inducted into a werewolf pack through the most ridiculous series of accidents imaginable, I couldn't help but think that maybe taking wrong turns wasn't such a bad thing after all. Sometimes the best adventures begin when you stop following the path you planned and start following the one that calls to something deeper than logic. And if that path leads to supernatural bonds and werewolf drama, well, at least it's never going to be boring. The morning after is usually reserved for hangovers or regrettable texts. For me, it involved waking up on a bed of literal wolf furs in Marcus's cabin, feeling like I'd been struck by a bolt of lightning and then massaged by a professional athlete. The silence of the mountain was gone. In its place was a symphony of the impossible. I could hear the rhythmic thump-thump of a rabbit's heart in the brush 300 yards away. I could hear the sap groaning inside the pine trees. But most distractingly, I could hear them. The bond didn't just link our hearts. It turned my brain into a spiritual party line. She's awake. I can feel her pulse jumping. Is she scared? Marcus, is she scared? Should I make bacon? Do humans like bacon after a blood moon marking? That was Tyler. His thoughts were a frantic, golden yellow buzz at the back of my mind. He was pacing. I could feel the vibration of his feet through the floorboards, downstairs in the kitchen. Quiet, Tyler. You're shouting in her head. Let her breathe. That was Marcus. His mental voice was a low, velvet vibration. It didn't buzz, it anchored. It felt like a warm weight on my shoulders, steadying the chaos. I sat up, the fur sliding off my bare shoulders. The bite mark on my skin wasn't a wound anymore. It had scarred over into a shimmering, iridescent swirl of silver tissue that looked less like a scar and more like a brand of royalty. I walked downstairs, my borrowed oversized t-shirt hitting mid-thigh. I felt different. I didn't stumble. I didn't trip over the rug. My body felt calibrated, like a precision instrument I was finally learning how to play. In the kitchen, the scene was pure, unadulterated chaos. Tyler was at the stove, a mountain of bacon sizzling before him. He turned, his eyes flashing that neon beta blue for a split second before settling back into a nervous brown. Sarah, you're up. I made protein, lots of protein. Your cells are regenerating at 6 times the human rate, so you need the calories. Tyler, I croaked, my voice sounding like I'd swallowed gravel. Breathe. If you vibrate any harder, you're going to phase through the floor. Sorry, he winced, but his eyes were glued to the mark on my shoulder. The guilt rolling off him was so thick I could taste it. Bitter, like oversteeped tea. Stop that, I commanded. The word came out with a strange resonance. Tyler actually dropped the spatula. Stop what? The guilt. It's making my teeth ache. She's right, a new voice rumbled. Marcus was leaning against the doorframe, his massive frame nearly blocking out the morning sun. He was shirtless, wearing only a pair of gray sweatpants that hung dangerously low on his hips. If Tyler was a golden retriever, Marcus was a mountain. Cold, ancient, and immovable. He walked toward me, and the alpha pull hit me like a physical wave. It was an invisible hook in my sternum, dragging me toward him. My heart didn't just beat, it hammered against my ribs, demanding his proximity. Marcus stopped inches from me. He didn't touch me, but the heat radiating off his skin was better than any fireplace. He leaned down, his nose brushing the sensitive skin of my neck, right next to Tyler's mark. The beta bit you, Marcus whispered, his voice a dark caress, but the alpha's scent is already drowning him out. I gasped, my head tilting back involuntarily. Through the bond, I felt Tyler's sudden spike of jealousy, sharp and jagged, followed immediately by Marcus's smug, predatory satisfaction. Is this going to be my life now? I asked, breathless. Being a tug-of-war rope between the two of you? Marcus looked up, his amber eyes swirling with something possessive. No. You aren't the rope, Sarah. You're the linchpin. Without you, the pack is just a collection of animals. With you. He looked at Tyler, then back to me. We are a dynasty. The moment was shattered by a sharp, rhythmic howling from outside. It wasn't a greeting. It was a warning. Marcus's entire demeanor shifted. The man vanished, replaced by the apex predator. His muscles locked and his nostrils flared. What is it? I asked, the hair on my arms standing up. The silverback pack, Tyler said, his voice dropping the puppy act instantly. He moved to the window, his movements fluid and lethal. They heard the rumor, an accidental bonding. A human Luna. They think the alpha is weak for letting a beta claim his prize. Marcus turned to me, his hand finally making contact. He cupped my face, his thumb grazing my lower lip. The spark was so intense I saw spots. Stay inside with Tyler, Marcus commanded. Like hell, I said, the word surprising even me. A month ago I would have hidden in a closet. But the wolf blood, or whatever was flowing through me now, was singing a different song. You said I'm the linchpin. If they're here to see the weak link, let's show them I don't break. Marcus stared at me, a slow, dangerous grin spreading across his face. Tyler, give her your leather jacket. If she's going to face a rival alpha, she might as well look the part. We stepped onto the porch. 3 men stood in the tree line. They were larger than the Pine Ridge wolves, scarred and smelling of old blood and wet earth. The leader, a man with a jagged scar across his throat, stepped forward. Marcus Blackwood, we heard you let a pup mark your female. We've come to see if the Pine Ridge Alpha has finally lost his teeth. The rival Alpha's eyes locked onto me, dragging over my legs, my face, and finally the silver mark on my shoulder. He laughed, a dry, rasping sound. A human? You're risking a war for a girl who'll break in one winter? I felt Marcus's rage. It was a volcano, ready to pop. I felt Tyler's fear, not for himself but for me. I did the only thing that felt right. I stepped in front of Marcus. The rival Alpha froze. Move, little girl. Make me, I said. I felt the bond flare. I drew energy from Tyler's speed and Marcus's raw power. My eyes, which had always been a boring brown, suddenly felt hot. In the reflection of Marcus's truck window, I saw it. My pupils weren't round. They were vertical slits of burning, molten silver. I might be human, I said, my voice echoing with a low, unnatural growl that shook the rival's confidence. But I have 2 wolves in my head, and both of them are very, very hungry. You want to see if Marcus has teeth? Why don't you worry about mine? The silence that followed was absolute. Then, Marcus stepped up behind me, his hands resting on my shoulders, claiming me in front of the world. You heard her, Marcus roared, the sound echoing off the peaks. Leave, before she decides she likes the taste of you. The silverback leader didn't move at first. He stood there, his nostrils twitching, trying to find the scent of my fear. But he couldn't find it, because it wasn't there. The human Sarah, who used to apologize to inanimate objects when she bumped into them, was gone. Buried under a landslide of alpha-grade adrenaline. Finally, he spat on the ground, his eyes lingering on my glowing silver irises with a mixture of hate and genuine curiosity. A freak, he muttered, though he took a step back. You've brought a freak into the fold, Blackwood. This isn't a bond, it's a mutation. We'll see how the council likes a Luna who isn't even the same species. With a flick of his hand, he and his men vanished into the trees, their movements a blur of unnatural speed. The moment they were gone, the power didn't just fade, it crashed. My knees buckled. I didn't hit the porch, though. Marcus's arms were around my waist in a heartbeat, his chest a solid wall of heat against my back. On my other side, Tyler was there, his hand gripping my elbow, his touch humming with a frantic, relieved energy. Sarah, Tyler breathed, his voice cracking. Your eyes? They're still silver. I feel like I just ran a marathon while being plugged into a car battery, I whispered. My skin was tingling, every pore feeling like it was breathing in the mountain air for the first time. Marcus turned me around in his arms, forced me to look at him. His expression was no longer the mask of the alpha. He looked haunted. That shouldn't have been possible. You channeled us. You didn't just use the bond, you tapped into the pack well. Is that bad? I asked, my head lolling against his shoulder. It's impossible, Marcus said, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. Humans are supposed to be the anchors, the calm for the wolf. They aren't supposed to be the lightning rod. They carried me back inside, literally. Marcus had my legs, Tyler had my back. They laid me on the oversized leather sofa in front of the fireplace. The afterglow of a supernatural surge, I quickly learned, was basically the world's most intense physical intimacy without the actual act. Because we were a triad, the sensations were magnified. I could feel Tyler's pride, it felt like bubbles in my bloodstream. I could feel Marcus's desire, it felt like a slow, licking flame at the base of my spine. You need to eat, Tyler said, though he didn't move. He was sitting on the floor by my feet, his forehead resting against my shin. The surge burns through glucose. If you don't eat, you'll go into shock. I paused, my tongue feeling heavy. I want that bacon, and I want to know why you both look like you're afraid of me now. Marcus sat in the armchair across from me, his eyes never leaving the mark on my shoulder. We aren't afraid of you, Sarah. We're afraid for you. What you did out there, word will spread. You're not just an accidental mate anymore. You're a power. And in our world, power is something people either want to serve or destroy. An hour later, I was demolished 3 plates of bacon and a literal quart of orange juice. I felt human again, mostly. except for the fact that I could still smell the exact brand of cigarettes the rival Alpha had been smoking. Cheap menthols from the porch. "We have to go to the pack house tonight," Marcus said, his voice grave. "The elders saw the flare. They'll want to witness the human silver eye for themselves." "I'm not a circus act, Marcus," I snapped. Tyler let out a small, startled laugh. "The bond is definitely working. You're starting to sound like him. Bossy, impatient, and terrifyingly certain of yourself." I looked at Tyler, really looked at him. The guilt was gone, replaced by a fierce, protective devotion. To him, I was his mistake turned miracle. To Marcus, I was the destiny he almost lost. I stood up, feeling a new kind of strength in my marrow. "If we're going to the pack house, I'm not going as a victim of an accident. I'm going as the person who just stared down an alpha twice my size." I looked at my reflection in the darkened window. The silver in my eyes had faded to a shimmering ring around my pupils, a permanent reminder that I wasn't just Sarah from the diner anymore. "Tyler, get the car," I said, a small, wicked smirk playing on my lips. "Marcus, find me something to wear that says, 'I could be your Luna,' or 'I could be your nightmare.' I think I'm done with the lace dresses." The Pine Ridge Pack House was a massive stone and timber fortress at the edge of the cliffs. As we pulled up in Marcus's blacked-out SUV, I could see them. Hundreds of wolves, some in human form, some watching from the shadows of the porch in their fur. The silence was different this time. It wasn't the shunning silence of the town. This was the silence of a forest before a storm. As I stepped out of the car, flanked by the Alpha and the Beta, a low vibration started. It wasn't a growl, it was a thrum. Every wolf in attendance was bowing their head, their throats exposed in a display of submission that made my heart stop. "They aren't bowing to me," Marcus whispered in my ear, his hand firm on the small of my back. "Then who?" I asked. "They're bowing to the mark," Tyler said from my left, his blue eyes glowing with pride. "Look at your shoulder, Sarah." I looked down. Through the fabric of the black silk shirt Marcus had given me, the bite mark was glowing. Not a faint shimmer, but a pulsing, moonlight-white radiance that cut through the darkness of the night. I wasn't just bonded to two men. I was becoming the heartbeat of the entire pack. The doors of the pack house swung open with a heavy, atmospheric groan that felt more like a physical vibration in my chest. If the cabin was Marcus's sanctuary, the pack house was his throne room. The air inside didn't just smell like pine. It smelled like power, old, thick, and intimidating. At the end of the long hall sat the High Council. 5 elders who looked like they'd been carved out of the mountain itself. Marcus Blackwood, the eldest, a man with hair the color of wood ash, spoke. "You bring the human before us, and the Beta who broke the blood law." Marcus stepped forward, his hand still anchored to the small of my back. I could feel his pulse through his palms, steady like a war drum. "I bring my mate," Marcus said, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "And my brother." "A triad is a myth of the Dark Ages, Marcus," Magda, the woman from the clearing, said. She stood among the elders, her eyes narrowed. "It creates a knot in the pack's energy. One woman cannot hold the tether of the Alpha's soul and the Beta's blood. She will burn out. She will break." "Does she look broken to you?" Tyler stepped up to my other side. He wasn't the nervous kid anymore. He was the Beta of Pine Ridge, and the air around him crackled with a new, lethal protective edge. "Appearance is a mask," the ash-haired elder said. "Let the moon decide. If she is the linchpin, she will survive the eclipse touch. If she is a pretender, the bond will snap and she will return to the dust of her human life." Before I could ask what the hell an eclipse touch was, Marcus pulled me back into the shadows of a stone pillar. Tyler joined us, his face pale. "Sarah, listen to me," Marcus whispered, his eyes searching mine. "There's a reason this is forbidden. 200 years ago, a triad formed in the north. The human couldn't handle the dual frequency. When the Alpha felt rage, she felt it. When the Beta felt pain, she felt it. She became a vessel for their darkest instincts. She leveled an entire village before her heart literally exploded from the pressure." "But that was then," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "They didn't have Pinot Grigio and true crime podcasts back then. I've lived my whole life managing chaos." "It's not just the energy," Tyler added, his voice a frantic whisper. "The eclipse touch is a psychic probe. The elders will pour the collective consciousness of the pack into your mind. If you aren't strong enough to filter it, you'll lose you. You'll just be a shell for the pack's memory. And if I pass? I asked. Marcus leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. Then you aren't just a Luna. You are the High Priestess of the Pine Ridge. You will have the power to command any wolf in this territory with a single thought. They led me to the center of the room, beneath a skylight that looked directly up at the peaking moon. The 5 elders stood in a circle around me. Close your eyes, Sarah of Pine Ridge, Magda whispered. I didn't close them. I looked at Marcus. I looked at Tyler. I drew in a breath of their scents, rain, damp earth, and burning cedar. Then, the elders touched me. 5 hands landed on my shoulders, my head, and my heart. The world turned white. Suddenly I wasn't in a room, I was everywhere. I was the wolf hunting in the valley. I was the mother nursing a cub in the den. I was the old man dying in the hospital. I was the rage of 1,000 fights and the grief of 1,000 funerals. It was a tidal wave of emotion, a screaming static of 100 different lives. It felt like my brain was being peeled back, layer by layer. She's drowning, I heard Tyler's voice in the distance, a faint sob. Hold on, Sarah? Anchor to me? Marcus's voice was a lighthouse in the storm. I reached for them in the white void. I found the silver-blue thread of Tyler's blood bond. I found the molten gold cord of Marcus's soul bond. I took those 2 threads and I braided them. I didn't try to fight the pack's memories. I welcomed them. I opened my heart and let the tidal wave flow through me instead of hitting me. I felt the moment it changed. The screaming turned into a song. The static turned into a heartbeat. My heartbeat. My eyes snapped open. I wasn't just Sarah anymore. I was the pack. The elders recoiled as if they'd been burned. The stone floor beneath my feet cracked, a spiderweb of fractures radiating outward. The silver in my eyes wasn't just a ring anymore. My entire irises were glowing like twin moons, casting a pale, ethereal light over the horrified council. The bond didn't break, Magda whispered, falling to her knees. She absorbed it. I looked at the ash-haired elder, the one who had called me a pretender. I didn't speak with my mouth, I spoke with my will. Kneel, I thought. The elder's legs gave out instantly. He hit the stone floor with a bone-jarring thud, his eyes wide with terror and awe. He couldn't move. He couldn't even blink. I turned to Marcus and Tyler. They were staring at me as if they'd never seen me before. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in Marcus's eyes. The fear of a man who realized his mate wasn't just his equal, but his superior. I walked over to him, my steps silent. The silver light in my eyes slowly receding, but the power humming in my skin. I reached out and traced the line of Marcus's jaw. I told you, I whispered, my voice echoing with the weight of 100 ancestors. I'm not the one who breaks. I turned to the room of hundreds of wolves, all watching in breathless silence. The silverbacks are coming back, I announced, the knowledge clicking into place from the pack's collective intuition. They're bringing the hunters with them. They think we're divided. They think the triad is a weakness. I looked at Marcus, then Tyler, pulling them both into my orbit. Let's go show them how wrong they are. The battle for Pine Ridge could wait an hour. The war for my soul, however, was currently being fought in the silence of Marcus's master suite. The air in the room was thick, charged with the kind of static that precedes a lightning strike. The trial by moonlight had left me wired. Every nerve ending felt raw, hypersensitive to the shift of air, the smell of the dying fire, and the 2 men watching me from the shadows. Sarah, Tyler whispered. He was standing by the window, the moonlight catching the blue of his eyes. He looked vulnerable, yet utterly dangerous. You're glowing, literally. I looked at my hands. A faint silver luminescence was shimmering beneath my skin, pulsing in time with my heart. It won't stop. I can feel everything. I can feel the wind on the ridge. I can feel the elders' fear downstairs. But mostly, I turned to look at Marcus. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, his hands clasped, his knuckles white. I can feel the 2 of you pulling me apart. Marcus stood up, his movements slow and deliberate. The bond is solidified now. There's no more accidental about it. You're the bridge between the alpha and the beta. But that bridge carries a lot of weight, Sarah. He walked toward me, until the heat of his body was a physical pressure. I spent my life preparing to lead. I never prepared to share. And Tyler? He glanced at his best friend, his brother in arms. He never prepared to take what was mine. I didn't take it, Tyler snapped, though his voice was thick with emotion. He crossed the room, stepping into my space. The moon gave it to me. The bond chose me to be her anchor. You're the fire, Marcus, but I'm the earth. She needs both or she'll burn up. I reached out, grabbing Marcus's hand with my right and Tyler's with my left. The circuit completed. The room vanished. In its place was a shared mental landscape, a forest of silver trees under a permanent eclipse. This was the triad space, a place where secrets were impossible. I saw Marcus's deepest fear, that he would become too much for me, that his darkness would extinguish my light. I saw Tyler's deepest longing, to be more than just a second best, to be loved for who he was, not just for the bond he accidentally stole. Look at me, I commanded, my voice echoing in their heads. I pulled them closer, forcing them to see me, not the Luna, not the linchpin, but Sarah, the girl who used to burn water. I don't care about the laws of the pack. I don't care that this is forbidden, I told them. I leaned into Marcus, my lips brushing his, tasting the salt and the storm. Then I turned to Tyler, my fingers tangling in his hair, drawing him down until our foreheads touched. The intimacy was staggering. It wasn't just physical, it was a total blending of identities. For a moment I wasn't sure where my heartbeat ended and theirs began. We are the storm, I whispered against Tyler's skin, and we are the shelter. The moment of peace was shattered by a psychic scream that ripped through the bond. It was Magda, the elder. The perimeter is breached. Silverbacks, they aren't alone, they've brought the hunters. The word hunters hit like a bucket of ice water. In the werewolf world, hunters weren't just men with guns, they were specialists. Silver-lace traps, wolfsbane gas, and a generational hatred for anything that shifted. Marcus's eyes went full amber. Tyler's went electric blue. They waited for the trial to end, Marcus growled, his human skin already beginning to ripple as the wolf fought to the surface. They thought we'd be exhausted. They thought wrong, I said. I felt the silver light in my eyes roar back to life. But this time, I didn't just feel the power. I felt the weapons. Marcus, take the North Ridge with the enforcers. Tyler, you take the tunnels, they're trying to flank the nursery. I'll stay here at the pack house. No, Marcus and Tyler said in unison. You don't understand, I said, a cold, predatory smile spreading across my face as I felt the entire pack's energy waiting for my command. I'm not staying here to hide. I'm staying here because they're coming for the human girl. And I want to be the last thing they see before the moon goes dark. I reached into the bond, tapping into the ancient memory I'd absorbed during the trial. I felt the ground beneath the pack house hum. Go, I commanded. Now. The Alpha and the Beta didn't argue. They couldn't. The linchpin had spoken. They shifted mid-air, two massive wolves, one midnight black, one charcoal gray, leaping from the balcony into the dark forest below. I stood alone on the balcony, watching the orange glow of torches approaching through the trees. I could smell the acrid scent of wolfsbane. I could hear the clicking of silver bolts being loaded into crossbows. I closed my eyes and reached out to the trees, the rocks, and the very air of Pine Ridge. You're on my mountain now, I whispered. The orange glow of the torches wasn't just fire, it was a death sentence. As the silverbacks and their hired hunters broke through the tree line, the air turned toxic. I could smell the wolfsbane, a heavy, cloying scent, like rotting lilies that made my lungs burn. The hunters were tactical. They moved in a silent, professional phalanx, clad in high-tech tactical gear, reinforced with silver mesh plating. They didn't howl. They didn't growl. They just aimed. A silver bolt hissed through the air, narrowly missing my ear and thudding into the wooden pillar behind me. The wood began to sizzle and blacken instantly. The girl, a voice barked from the darkness. Take her alive. The Alpha will surrender if we have the linchpin. I didn't run. I didn't even flinch. I felt Marcus's snarl in the back of my mind. He was miles away on the North Ridge, tearing through a flank of invaders, but his protective instinct was a physical heat in my chest. Sarah, get inside, he roared through the bond. Hold your line, Marcus, I sent back, my voice cool and absolute. I've got this. I stepped to the edge of the balcony. Below me, 30 hunters and a dozen silverback wolves in human form looked up. They saw a girl in a silk shirt. They saw easy prey. I reached out my hands, palms toward the earth. I didn't call on the wolves. I called on the ridge. You came to hunt in my woods, I whispered, but my voice echoed through the clearing like a thunderclap. I tapped into the triad well. I drew the raw, unrefined rage from Marcus and the agile, kinetic speed from Tyler. I braided them together with my own human will and slammed it into the ground. The stone of the pack house didn't just vibrate, it screamed. Huge shards of ancient granite erupted from the earth like jagged teeth, literal mountain stone rising to form a barricade between me and the hunters. The shockwave knocked the first line of men off their feet. Fire! The leader screamed. A volley of silver bolts rained down. In my peripheral vision, I saw Tyler. He had finished securing the tunnels and was now a blur of charcoal fur, leaping from a high branch into the midst of the hunters to distract them. Tyler, stay back! I screamed mentally. A bolt caught Tyler in the shoulder. I felt it. The searing burn of silver, as if it were in my own flesh. I gasped, falling to one knee. The pain was blinding, a white-hot iron being driven into my soul. And that was their mistake. When you hurt a member of a triad, you don't just injure one wolf, you ignite the other two. My vision went white. The silver in my eyes spilled over, glowing so brightly that the clearing was illuminated like high noon. I stood up, my hair whipping around my face in a wind that didn't exist. You hurt him, I said. My voice was no longer human. It was the sound of shifting tectonic plates. I didn't use a weapon, I used the air. I pulled the oxygen out of the circle around the hunters. I watched as they dropped their weapons, clutching at their throats, their eyes wide with the realization that they weren't fighting a werewolf. They were fighting a force of nature. Then the forest exploded. Marcus burst from the undergrowth, his midnight black form twice the size of any other wolf. He wasn't just fighting, he was a hurricane of teeth and fur. Seeing Tyler injured and me in the silver state had driven him into a feral frenzy. He tore through the remaining silverbacks like they were made of paper. Within minutes, the clearing went silent, save for the crackling of the torches and the heavy, ragged breathing of the survivors. The hunters who could still walk were fleeing into the dark, leaving their silver gear behind. The silver light in my eyes flickered and died. The power retracted like a tide, leaving me hollow and freezing. I collapsed. Before I hit the stone, Marcus was there. He had shifted back to human form, his skin stained with the soot and blood of the battle. He caught me, his arms trembling with the effort of coming down from his alpha high. Sarah, he choked out, his face buried in my neck. Don't ever do that again. You almost burned out. I felt your heart skip. Tyler limped toward us, shifting back as he walked. His shoulder was a mess. The silver bolt had left a blackened, smoking wound. But his eyes were only on me. She saved us, Tyler whispered, collapsing onto the porch next to us. He reached out a shaking hand, touching my hair. She used the mountain. Marcus, she actually used the mountain. I looked at them both. My alpha, covered in the marks of war, and my beta, wounded but standing. I could feel their love, their terror, and their awe swirling around me in a chaotic, beautiful mess. I looked at the bite mark on my shoulder. It wasn't glowing anymore, but it felt warm, a permanent anchor to this life, this pack, and these two men. The silverbacks will be back, I said, my voice barely a whisper as the exhaustion finally claimed me, and the council will have more questions. Marcus looked out over the ridge, his eyes hard and protective. Let them come. We aren't a myth anymore, we're a pack. He picked me up, Tyler leaning against his side for support, and carried me back into the house. As the sun began to peek over the mountains, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold, I realized that the ordinary girl who burned water was truly gone. In her place was something the world hadn't seen in centuries. The clearing fell into a heavy, reverent silence as the first rays of the sun hit the peaks of Pine Ridge. The smoke from the torches curled upward, like incense rising to a goddess who had just finished her work. Marcus didn't put me down. He held me against his chest, as if I were the most fragile glass and the most powerful weapon in the world all at once. Tyler followed close behind, his hand resting on Marcus's shoulder, not just for physical support, but to complete the circuit. Even in the silence, the bond was humming, a three-part harmony that finally felt in tune. We reached the top of the stone steps, and I looked back one last time. The stone barricades I had raised from the earth remained, a permanent monument to the night, The ordinary waitress rewrote the laws of nature. You realize, Tyler whispered, a ghost of his old playful smirk returning to his pale face, that after this, the diner is definitely going to have to find a new waitress. I let out a soft, exhausted laugh, leaning my head into the crook of Marcus's neck. I don't know, Tyler. I think I'm pretty good at multitasking. I can lead a supernatural revolution and still make a mean cup of coffee. Marcus stopped at the threshold of the pack house. He looked down at me, his amber eyes reflecting the dawn, filled with a depth of devotion that made the linchpin power feel like a flickering candle compared